Okay, we are live, I think. Let me just make sure it's working. Um, cool. I think we're live here. Hi, everyone. My name is Hillary. I am a community builder at Masterclass. Um, Sorry, I'm just making sure this works here. Okay, here we go.
Anyone here was in the chat room?
Awesome. So it's working. We're live. My name's Hillary. We're a community builder. I'm a community builder at Masterclass. Thanks so much for tuning in to our community event here. I'll just introduce our three wonderful co-hosts. We have Rob coming in from New York City.
Hey guys.
We have Noe coming in from Laredo, Texas.
Hello.
And we have Chris coming in from St. Louis. Do you guys want to say hi to all the viewers right now? Just introduce yourself, maybe just one thing that you loved learning from Dustin Hoffman's masterclass.
Sure. My name is Rob. Something I love about Dustin Hoffman's masterclass is truly how he kind of throws caution to the wind all the time in his approach to it in a way that's like so freeing and really healthy. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Noe, do you want to say hi?
Hello, my name is Noel Torres. Usually go by Noe. And yeah, one of the things that really got me about Dustin Hoffman's masterclass, it was my first. I think it had been released. I think it was like a few weeks old when I first signed up, and it was my first time trying anything acting related. And it just really opened me up to like. I mean, it just one of the things that struck me was how universal the advice is. That you could pretty much apply it to anything. And I was telling you guys earlier that I used to study music, and there was so much from that I immediately thought about music, my guitar playing, and all that. And yeah, so it's just he makes everything really relatable, really accessible. And it was kind of weird. I mean, you have to kind of, I imagine you have to have kind of an open mind when you're approaching something like Dustin Hoffman's masterclass, especially in contrast to the Kevin Spacey one. They're just both so different, and yeah, I think it was the right thing to have him do the first acting masterclass because it was just amazing, and it just kind of changed my world.
Awesome. Love hearing that. Thank you. Chris, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
I'm Chris. I'm from Atlanta, and it's starting to be a burgeoning acting area. And so I thought this would be a great way because we're still working on trying to get real good acting teachers here in Atlanta. So I thought Masterclass would be the place to go when I saw that Dustin. And I think I started it. I got on when it was just a few weeks old as well. And yeah, what struck me about him is he's just so right at you. He's just so open in terms of explaining everything and just telling it like it is. Telling it. And what I really liked, when he was talking, he's just advice. He had some great advice in terms of, you've just gotta act all the time. Don't. An audition is acting, and just remember that when you have all these failures, that this is just part of your practice. That's the way you've got to look at it. It's part of your practice
100%.
because you are. And I wasn't. I've been looking at so many things, but I think it was said. It's what. Oh, he was. It was towards the end. He said, "It's the issue of failing." That's the reason why I took this on. he goes, you can fail at this all the time, and unfortunately, in this environment, there are so many actors and everybody wants to be an actor, and you don't know what part you're ever going to get, and you just got to just try to be real at your craft, and come on and hit those auditions spot on, and that's all you can do. Everything else is not going to be up to you. So, you know, like I said, his advice, you really felt like you were just sitting there. You know, you were sitting down over a you know, dinner or something with him, and he's just kind of, you know, he's just sitting you down. Hey, let me talk to you about acting. You know, that's what I felt like. I mean, it really felt pretty.
Absolutely. That's kind of how I describe it to people. It's kind of like sitting down, having a long lunch with someone, and just being able to ask them whatever you want. Well, awesome. Let's get started with our discussion here. So we'll start with our overall review of method acting. The prompt being, what are some of the main components of method acting, and how did it grow into a whole style of acting? And maybe mentioning some famous method actors that come to mind, and talking about its influence on acting in general. Any of you can start.
Well, one thing I wanted to address, you know, as far as the subject of method acting goes, is how kind of not really general, but how broad, I guess, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look at I mean, with the term method acting, one of the first people to come to mind for a lot of people is Marlon Brando, and the fact that he really didn't. In some of the interviews, he kind of says that he speaks ill of method acting. You know, how he dislikes the term, and that's probably close to Stella Adler. Her attitudes towards method acting, which is probably just her personal grievances against Leo Strasberg. And I mean, we can get into so much. There's just so much to dissect here, but yeah, I mean, one of the most interesting things about that is, well, a lot of the acting teachers, or you know, method acting, all kind of started with Stanislavski.
Mm-hmm.
And one interesting thing that relates to Stella Adler was that in her book, she kind of says not to read Stanislavski's books because we can't relate to them because we're from a completely different world. Well, his world is completely different from ours, but it's kind of counterintuitive to what she teaches because we're supposed to try to understand, you know, as actors.
Sure.
And that's always been a really interesting component of acting, like in general, to me, is that more specific to Stella Adler's method.
Absolutely.
And that one part especially, like, don't try to understand Stanislavski because you can't, but also as actors, I mean, that's kind of your job as an actor.
Yeah.
Try to understand the subject of the character.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Chris.
what I was going to say was, as far as the technique goes, for all these different techniques, they do seem to all have a basis in just trying to keep it real. You know, just trying to bring yourself through to the performance, and yet, you know, make it as authentic as possible. I mean, I know we'll get into Marathon Man and all of that, and I have read, and I happen to come up not only the article that you had put Meryl Streep issues, but there is a great Variety magazine article, if you guys have read that one, which is pretty in depth in terms of the Meryl Streep's take on it, because I know it's based on I think she was in April of 2016 they published something in regards to her book that's coming out, and Dustin Hoffman's influence on her whole performance and things, and yeah, it was a little extreme, some of the things he did, but you can understand. I mean, she's look what it did to her in terms of elevating her performance. I'm not saying that necessarily all his stuff was what she used, but I'll just say that obviously that was the starting point of her career in terms of film, was that particular. And it's just amazing how it's so gut-wrenching, some of these things, some of the techniques that are used to try to bring out those type of authentic performances.
Totally.
Absolutely.
I always wonder what it's like to have Meryl Streep and Dustin Hoffman together, and like how does he maybe he doesn't pull her aside to be like, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z at some point, or we're about to enter a world in which like super spontaneous. Are you down? Maybe you're not, but I'm doing it. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I find it so interesting when we read about Stanislavski and where he came from in terms of wanting to reform this like huge pageantry way of acting that he was being taught into something much more real life, but still elevated. And then we take it here, and much like so many things we Americanize as Americans, we add this layer of like what's almost like aggression to it. Like you are going to stay awake all night because
Yeah.
this is America. I don't know, but I think it's an interesting continuation, just culturally as well, how we end up taking Stanislavski and adapting it to our life here, in like in a New World sense. So that's something that always crosses my mind when I'm thinking about the relationship between Stanislavski and Method. Yeah, Chris, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, Rob, I was going to just say that I just saw an interview. Google is great because you can you can spend all day, I almost spent all day, going through some of these things and some interviews with different actors. And Christopher Plummer said that when Stanislavski's system and Strasberg came in to being, when he was, as his fine roots go as far as the acting technique, that's more the classic technique. He called the Strasberg people the Italian boys because because it was Brando and and De Niro and all this stuff, and he said, and they'd come down from the play and they'd be in little suit and ties and they'd be all nice and into the bar, and they'd be hanging out with the Italian boys, they come in with the torn up jeans and the what's a guy, they take that Russian thing and they've just made it much more earthy and streetwise. So yeah, it is funny how you're right, we Americanize it or Italianize it, however way you want to look at it.
Yeah.
I've seen a few of those interviews, I think, where he mentions that.
Yeah, cool. So we have some people in the chat room mentioning some famous method actors that come to mind. Obviously, Dustin Hoffman. We have Heath Ledger, Robert De Niro, as you just mentioned, and then Ed Harris, Joaquin Phoenix, Christian Bale. I would also add Meryl Streep is also a method actor sometimes. So in that article, she was also getting really deep into character for Margaret Thatcher. So that's another one that I would add to that list. And Daniel Day-Lewis, another method actor. So there's a lot. I thought in particular, I've seen some images of Jared Leto from that new film that he's doing, but he's totally
Suicide
changed.
Squad.
Yes, Suicide Squad. He's totally changed his whole appearance for it, and
That's right.
it's pretty shocking sometimes. Awesome. So we're going to move on to our next question. So what we've already touched on it a little bit, but what makes method acting different than classical acting? What are some of the big differences between method acting, classical acting, and other ways of acting?
I would say like the biggest one is that it has you kind of pull out, draw from your own experience and really use genuine emotion rather than recreating the feeling. To really make the characters angry, then like think of something that makes you angry and really bring that out. Same thing. A grieving character. Actually, interesting point. That's what, in some of the stuff, I didn't get a chance to read what you posted, Hillary, but yeah, in some of the interviews I've seen in the past for the Marathon Man, Dustin Hoffman mentioned that one of the reasons, well, I'm not sure if it was him, but someone mentioned that Dustin Hoffman wanted Meryl Streep because John Cazale, and something I'll mention towards the end of the interviews, towards the end of the hangout here. But yeah, John Cazale had just passed away, her boyfriend at the time. And she thought that Dustin Hoffman thought Meryl Streep would be perfect that emotion, and that was already there at the forefront. And she could really bring that forward easily. And so yeah, I think that would be like one of the main components of method acting that sets it apart from other methods.
Absolutely. I didn't
And
know
some of the
that
preparation.
about Meryl Streep.
Yes.
Go
Chris,
ahead,
you
Chris.
Oh yeah. And by the way, how's my am I lagging? I was lagging in our pre.
Yes,
I
it's
can
doing
hear
okay.
you. I can hear you well.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Good.
yeah.
Very
There's
good.
little
Very
moments
good.
here where you cut off, but
Okay, but yeah, I was just going to say that again with the classical, a lot of that's coming from the stage, and it's that issue of enunciation so that everybody from the back row can hear it, and it's really the technique in terms of presentation and presentation of the lines, but with Stanislavski, and I guess it was with Chekhov, right? Was where it all started with the Chekhov plays. They pretty much worked hand in hand, Stanislavski and Chekhov, in terms
oh
of the performance.
yeah,
So, but yeah, it's just a more authentic. But the lengths and the I've always thought with method acting, the concern I always have with applying that wholeheartedly is that I'd be afraid that I would lose myself in the character to a point where I can't come back. Some of these guys like Depp and
Right.
who's also method acting, they seem a little crazy, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, but you know, at the same time, you've got to admire and De Niro with the boxing, where he actually became what was it, number 10 of the 10 top fighters, middleweight fighters, while he was, I mean, because he wanted to be a fighter for Raging Bull, and so he developed himself to a point where he was a contender for that spot. It's amazing, and it's something.
Something that really resonates there with what you just said here, Chris, about being able to pull back from it and be able to separate. Um, I I'm an actor myself, and I've had a friend of mine once was coaching a friend on a piece, and they were working. And at one point, she left the work session, and we were talking about it. And she was like, "I feel like I was like a doctor practicing medicine without a license. That's what I felt like there, when like I read a book." So I totally hear that. I think that's part of when you choose to go down the road of method acting. You have to know where your limits are already, right? I had one of my favorite teachers used to focus a lot in terms of energy, and in terms of if you're, say, it's a scene with a mother, and you don't particularly have a very close relationship with your mother, perhaps there is someone of a similar relationship, and what that energy is, what that warmth is, that you feed off of. And very often finding ways to distract our brain that's going through what is my next line, my costume's falling apart, and focusing on, in this scene, for me, it was always temperature. I don't know. Like focusing on what the temperature of the actual room was, how hot or how cold the room was between these two people, or particular memories that I have that would be able to put every other detail into place. That was always like my little gate into being able to recall a memory, to keep it there, and be able to go out on stage and just do it.
Absolutely. So we have a couple people participating in the chat room. Anna says for her, what's different between method acting and other types is that you stay completely immersed in your character all the time, even when you stop being in front of the camera. And you breathe and talk like, think like, live like your character, depending on how far you're willing to go. You have to be able to have a good sense of who you are and what you do to drop it when you finish, which I think is a really good point. And Maggie M brought up a good question that I'm also curious about. How do you not be nervous when you're showing this raw emotion and you might not want to share that experience with a bunch of people? How do you stay calm and stay confident? Do you guys have any experience in that?
Well, I
I
don't
was going
personally.
to You go, well, Rob, did you want to say anything on this one?
No, go ahead. No, by all means, guys.
It is interesting how these raw emotions can. I was taking an acting class where, and unfortunately I wasn't able to finish it. But in the same respect, the thing about this type of technique is it's like your teacher sometimes is a psychologist, and they'll say to you, "Where'd you get that emotion from?" You know, and you're having to expose yourself, and people were saying some really, you can tell there was some trouble in their life. No, you didn't have to tell. They told you everything. It was like they were peeling back the raw emotions of their life, and it can be scary sometimes, and not only nervous but scary. And I think Uta Hagen, when it gets to a point where I liked her advice on the issue of method. I guess we'll say her take on it is it depends on what you want to do in terms of sharing what you're using to bring forth that raw emotion. And she said she used to change it up all the time. She would think of things but sometimes after a while that wouldn't work. That particular, a dog dying, everybody uses that as or okay, that doesn't work, because after a while you start tending to lose it, especially if you're doing a theater performance night after night after night. And so she would change it up, but she wouldn't tell people. She wouldn't reveal what she was using because she felt that for her that lost it. What do you think about that, Rob?
I would agree. I think class is super important. In terms of being able to know your pattern and know what's on the page emotionally, and by that I mean on the page what you have rehearsed, and therefore you know how to deviate from it. Sort of how a musician will know the literal notes are on a page, and in a performance, that's where it's lifelike. And one of my favorite comparisons, actually, about what actors do, comes from a book title that a professor of mine gave me called "An Acrobat of the Heart." In terms of, and getting back to that, we do practice and we do work, and sometimes we have a reputation for being the laziest of artists, but in doing that work and doing the work and sort of honoring that, then we do know how to come out of it. But in terms of getting the gall to be so vulnerable, I know for me it's a freeing thing. I don't know. That might sound strange, but for me it's sort of, it's happening and it's going to be done, and at the end of the day I will go home and there will be another show tomorrow, and everyone witness that and carry on with our lives. It's momentary, it's fleeting, and that's what's awesome about it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's why we want to be actors to begin with. Is that it is exhilarating. If it isn't really exhilarating to you, it's a real hard road. Like Dustin often said, if you don't like it as much as sex,
Right.
and maybe because it is something where it is like you say. If you look at it like it's a freeing experience, that you're able to, and it is a beautiful thing to be able to take a character and develop it to a point, do the research to a point where you can, you transform yourself for a day or a couple months or whatever, and be that person. I mean, you get to play make believe and put on that Superman's cape, and perform for either on stage or on film. It's really, I think it's wonderful.
Has anyone here seen Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
When I saw it, some friends of mine sat me down and they were like, if you like Dustin Hoffman, this is required viewing, because it had slipped beneath my radar. I don't know. There was a moment that struck me when I was watching Tootsie where I just forgot he was acting. And it's a mind-blowing thing. It's like a magic trick for me. Every time I have that moment, it never gets old. With any actor, any of those actors that everyone in the chat room named, I in all of their movies, that there's a point in which you forget that that is someone acting, and it's incredible. That's what I want to do.
I
That's why
think
they're good.
that's a very interesting thing you just brought up is that um, some of these people. I mean, there's some actors who you always know from a particular role, and
Hmm.
then some actors who are just so good, and they're just in so much. Like, let's say for me, Channing Tatum is one of the guys
Yeah.
that like anything he's in, it's Channing Tatum being a cop or Channing Tatum, uh, one of the GI Joes, you know. But
Uh,
when it comes to then actually some Leonardo DiCaprio is very much like that. Like anytime I'm watching his movies, except say for maybe The Aviator, um, I'm anytime I look at the screens, like it's Leonardo DiCaprio acting the crap out of this. But there are certain actors who do transcend themselves as the character. Bill Murray, I posted about that recently on both acting pages. Um, it's always Bill Murray on the screen, right?
yeah.
Certain people though is like Daniel Day Lewis is always he's so good. He's always the character. And I never watch his movies and think I'm watching Daniel Day Lewis. And Dustin Hoffman likewise. I mean, they just become
Hmm.
that character, and they're so immersed in it that you just forget. You forget it's them. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and
Yeah.
um, it's just that I think that's something anyone who's in acting should strive for. That you've got to
No.
you're no longer yourself. You don't have that nervous tick that you do, like you're biting your lip when you're getting asked a question, or
Sure.
you every time you're thinking a certain thought, you rub your chin. I mean, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
You have to lose those. I mean, and actually, anyone who reads the Song of Ice and Fire book series, pay attention to Arya's storyline. She's pretty much learning to be an actor. You know? And even in a little bit in the show, they don't cover it so thoroughly. But yeah, it's about like leaving yourself behind, which is
Yeah.
what sometimes people might find the problem with method acting is that it relies on you still being you. You know, relying on
Hmm.
your own experience.
I'm going to tie in some more comments from the chat room real quick.
Yeah.
Acting School says creating a deeper connection to your character is one difference between classical and method acting. Annabra also suggested that Tom Hiddleston joined method acting in his two latest movies, I Saw the Light and High Rise. And then Acting School also added that there needs to be a cognitive and emotional understanding of the role, and a classical actor has more control and precision in their acting, more like script analysis and things like that. They also add that method acting can allow for more improvisation in the script, which is something that Dustin talks about a lot. He talks about those famous scenes in Rain Man in particular, the phone booth scene. It was mostly
Yeah.
improvised. Awesome.
Funny.
Well, let's segue into our next discussion topic, kind of naturally here. How do you see method acting influences Dustin's acting, and what are some examples of Dustin going deep into character with his method acting approach?
Well,
Anyone
like you
can
said, but I was going to say, obviously, well, God, there's so many examples for him. I mean, he's from Tootsie, which was just hilarious. If anybody, it's a little bit dated, that movie now. You know, it's getting a little bit
For sure.
dated, but it's still so funny, and just the way he brings out, and you can see him probably. He would probably be annoying to some directors, I would imagine. You know,
Yeah.
he's in your face, and he has his opinion. You know, and that's basically what Tootsie's about—a guy who's got so much opinion that no one wants to work for them anymore. So he has to find another way. But just the way he immerses himself in the characters, like that one and Rain Man, is just it's just amazing. It's just absolutely amazing how he all the little ticks and just spending so much time. And it's the research too that these guys do. So they
Yeah.
dig so deep.
What was one of that, like, one of the things he says in the movie that his character is like, that he didn't want to be a grape, like, he didn't want to play the grape in that way because a grape wouldn't feel that way. Or, I mean, I don't know, like, what was it? It was one of the first things that he gets, I can't remember, it's been years since I've seen that movie, but I think in what I'm recalling right now is that he was some kind of fruit or vegetable, and that he had trouble with the director because, Chris, you look like you're remembering what I'm saying.
Wait, that's right. Yeah, I do remember that. And that's in Tootsie, right? Yeah.
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 It was funny.
I,
I go back and watch it.
And when you guys, if you rewatch it, I think you'll understand what I'm saying. But right now, I can't recall the exact line. But.
Rob, were you going to say something?
Yeah. There was something that Dustin Hoffman put out about working on Tootsie specifically. I know we were talking about about Marathon Man for a second here, but he was discussing. This went viral on Facebook, which maybe people have seen him having a moment when he first sees himself dressed up as a woman, and he kind of says like, "Nope, like try again. I look better as a woman than this." And everyone on the crew kind of said to him, "Nope, that's it. That's as good as it gets." And how he was just so distracted by how his reaction to that moment when he realized how many times he had walked down the street and not paid someone attention based off of their physical appearance, and how that then informed how he approached the character, and that was a whole other level to her that didn't exist before in his prep. And I think back to that all the time. Like, you don't know when you jump into a project like that what's going to come up. And here he had to face some of his own stuff to work through the project.
His I think in that interview what he said is like he saw that he was an ugly woman, and he told him that that's how you look as a woman, and then he wept because if his default form as a woman was an ugly woman, then he kind of felt that it was unfair, right? Something like that it was unfair that some people are just like written off as ugly, people. I mean, especially women, and might be overlooked for this or that because of the way they look, right? And that was his when he first saw himself and thought like, "Oh, I'm ugly, make me pretty," right? Or something like that. That was a really that went viral about just about a year ago, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting article to read, especially in the context of watching his master class and seeing, how emotional he just gets on camera talking about things. And so I felt like he just as a person, he's very close to his emotions, and he's very close to how he feels and likes being in touch with, how he approaches things and what's going on in his mind. So it must have been a really interesting thing to just feel so different than yourself and be that uncomfortable with it.
Well, actually, to the point where he'll go out, like he was talking about in Tootsie, where he actually went out to his son's school dressed up that way. I mean, that's I guess again an example of the method being used, that you stay in character even in your everyday life sometimes to get a real and that's what he was saying. To go down the street, say the lines, be the character, interact with people as the character, so you really feel like you are that person and not you're not that person acting as a person like that. So it's just it's amazing the transformations that can occur.
Absolutely. I'm going to tie in some more chat from the chat room, and I would add that an excellent example and a recommendation is seeing Marlon Brando's first film, The Men. And Jeff Cole also adds that all of this discussion boils down to is the amount of work and risk an actor is willing to take. So often we get caught in the production machine and viewed as a commodity and not an artist. It's a big risk to go deep, whether method or otherwise. Stage offers so many more opportunities to expanding your acting library to draw from. I think that's a really good point.
That's a great comment. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're going to kind of switch gears here and focus more on those clips from Marathon Man that were shared on the event description. So we're going to start with how Dustin created his character, the prompt being, it's known that Dustin stayed up for days. The reason maybe being him partying, maybe him being that on purpose to reach the amount of exhaustion and emotional truth his character has in those scenes. And in the bathtub scene, he reportedly dunked himself so many times that he was actually gasping for air in the scene rather than faking it. So how do you think these tactics help Dustin create the character, and what else do you think he does to create it? I know it's a kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, one of the things that for that
I
one,
thought that in the bathtub scene, he did a lot of he did this one thing that I thought was really smart and really something that I would do too if I was panicked like that. He kind of whispered to himself like shit, and he just did that. And he did some really illogical things that someone might do when they're panicked like that. So I thought that kind of real human nature kind of actions when you're that scared and that panicked was something really smart.
Trying to put on your pajamas in the nude. That's fun when you're wet. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Hillary, that totally resonated with me as well in terms of I noticed I was paying attention to his breath so much during that scene, in terms of how shallow it was, and that was so small, and that raised the stakes so much more. And that was just such like a very practical, seemingly simple, and effective thing to do. Yeah.
For me, one of the things that, as far as where I kind of like wonder what he did, when it kind of gets me to think, is the scene where he's getting drilled. Because to me, it's like that's always when I think about like getting into character for a scene where you have to be in serious pain. I never really know where to approach it from, except when I think about that scene in particular, because I've had severely impacted wisdom teeth in the past, and where it was like growing downwards. My tooth was growing downwards and into the root of the next tooth, and whenever he had, that I only had to deal with for a couple of weeks, but it kind of reminded me of how that felt. Like I had some nerve pain in my lower back in the past when I was younger. When I was like in middle school, I think, and that was so bad. So whenever I heard him scream, during that scene, I thought about the pain I would experience in my lower back. Back when I was in middle school. When it was like a pinched nerve, it was, oh man, the pain was it was a fracture, it was a ruptured disc, 2 ruptured discs in my lower back, and it just made me think that, man, like I feel you, like I know what you're feeling, I know that feeling right now, right? And it, I don't know if that's what he was drawing from, like a genuine, I don't know if Dustin Hoffman was actually thinking about a time where he's experienced similar pain, but for me, that's how I related to the character during that time. It's just like remembering a time when I felt a similar kind of pain.
Absolutely. I think watching that scene is like, it makes you feel that pain.
Oh my God.
I think you can't. I don't think you can watch that scene without cringing, like a little bit, like. Oh.
I took a break. I had to hit the pause and then come back to it.
The funny thing about that scene is that it's been years since I've watched The Marathon Man, and I've recommended it to many people, and I just watched it the other day, and what I found amazing is he made that scene so intense for me, and I still remember it for all these years, that it seemed a lot longer that he was in that chair than the
Right.
two.
Yeah.
So I went back and I go, I didn't realize how brief it was. Because I felt that emotion. When he yelled, oh my God, it was chilling, man. When he, oh my God.
Yeah, they did a really good job at setting up that scene, so everyone watching kind of cringed collectively. I thought, Noe, what you were saying earlier about Dustin kind of, you don't know if he was thinking about an experience where he felt that pain, but something that I was thinking of, like I mentioned earlier, Dustin stayed up for multiple nights on end to kind of get to that same level of exhaustion. So maybe he was thinking, if I can't inflict pain on myself because that might be too far, maybe I can get to the similar level of exhaustion that my character would be in.
So the frustration, like you're talking about, like to get that, yeah.
Yeah, that level of exhaustion where he's been chased by this villain for so long. Maybe he couldn't inflict pain on himself, but he could exhaust himself to the point where he could be that much closer to the character in the film.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, it does bring a similar, it does raise a similar point there, and it's just, I mean, I never really paid attention to that because again, I didn't get a chance to read the material that you posted up there, but I do remember that when I watched the film, and I just saw those other scenes, where he was where he was running away, and I did really believe the exhaustion. This guy hasn't had a chance to. He just can't get a break. And he's just he's constantly running away. He's nervous, and I don't know. You do sense that frustration in him. And it's I think what's the next question on there? I think it's whether or not it was. Is it worth it?
Yeah, we can segue to that, so thank you. The next question would be, do you think he went too far? Do you think it's worth putting your health at risk to create a character? And maybe any thoughts on what you guys would have done differently?
Well, what we're discussing right now makes me think of that. Like, was that worth it? For him to put himself through all that. And that's a really subjective question, because at that point, all that matters is, does Dustin Hoffman think it was worth it for him to put himself through all that? And I think it's instead of asking, is it worth it for him to have done that? It's something we have to ask ourselves. Like, would it be worth it to put ourselves through that, right? And it's difficult. I mean, you got to take it back, like I guess, in a case-by-case basis. I think any of us would think, like, if the end result was good, then it would have probably been worth it, right? But
sure. I think. Sorry.
No,
If you're not putting yourself.
I think that it certainly plays into why we want to pay attention to Dustin Hoffman as well. Like, not to say that it's not by any means worthwhile or not actually what he would his actual approach to it, but I know when I'm watching a Dustin Hoffman movie that he has put himself through something physically that other humans have not, that until this point was fictional, and that is enthralling, and that is compelling. That does make me want to watch and watch that movie. But in terms of whether or not it's worth it, and that, yeah, of course, it's case-by-case basis, and I think what comes to mind here for me is Meryl Streep, and how Meryl Streep does sort of pick and choose from method acting techniques, and I could talk myself for 90 minutes straight about Meryl Streep when given the platform to, but I think it's worthwhile when you got that name and when you are doing it, and it's worthwhile in a safe place to explore it and see if it works.
Yeah.
I think if you feel the least bit unsafe about where you're maybe working on method acting, then perhaps that isn't the place to do it. Just because this
Yeah.
is something, But if you trust those around you and you're looking to take that risk, then absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that like you say, it's one of those things you can draw from in certain situations. I think um, that's my take on this. That as far as um, I definitely admire it, and
Yeah.
I think that I'll be delving into it more in terms of just a technique to draw from because some of these parts you take are pretty tough and pretty dark,
Yeah.
and in order for it to come out, you have to go there.
Yeah.
But hopefully, you don't have too many of those in your life. That's the problem with being typecast in a dark role. You're like, shoot, I did too good there. So, but
Absolutely.
yeah, but like, he's a testament to showing how versatile though he is because
Yes.
he's taken on many different roles that that's where I think we all want to have a career, don't we? Where
Right.
it's not just not one thing. Is that we're so versatile that people see it.
Mm-hmm. One
Absolutely.
thing.
Bringing in a couple comments from the chat room. Anna's saying she thinks it depends on what it means to you, what that character means to you, and how far you're willing to go. With all the care and medical assistance and psychological assistance, she thinks it's worth going for it. Acting school adds that it does help bring physical and emotional life to the character that he's playing, rather than pulling these emotions from inside. He's putting themselves in these situations physically. And Anna says, with a good team, a good common sense, after all, is a matter of trust with each other and those who you work with. So kind of going off what you were talking about, Rob, if you feel comfortable and not threatened in any way, I think that would make someone more comfortable to go for it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I would go for is that. I mean, I think something that's kind of a misconception in the whole thing about the cost. I mean, whether or not it's worth it, that comes down to like the cost of doing, this about the cost of what you're putting at risk when you're doing method acting. And I think one thing that every time I read one of these articles about one particular performance, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure that you guys will know what I mean, is that there's like a misconception that kind of becomes an urban legend that Heath Ledger, like for the Joker,
Hmm.
that so a lot of the articles that I read for that is that he OD'd because of the psychological damage, or I don't know, the places he had to go to embody the Joker. And to me, that's just so. I mean, and I'm sorry if anyone gets offended at this because I think what we're discussing right now is a lot more personal. But I mean, I just think that's so stupid. Like, it's an accidental overdose, right? And then people are bringing in this whole like, oh, he just got it too deep into the character and blah blah blah. I don't know. To me, that kind of undermines like whatever else is going on because I mean, acting, especially in the case of someone who makes a career out of it, like Heath Ledger, acting becomes your life. Right? That's his livelihood, but it's not his life. It's, and I'm sure I mean, I don't know. There's different levels of this for different people, but he doesn't seem like the type of actor who would have been so consumed by a character that he would have let it like interfere like with other aspects of his life, and because he's like him as a person, he had a daughter. And I'm sorry. I know this is getting kind of out of the, it's
No.
getting a little out of the subject, right? I'm sorry. And yeah, it's getting a little out of the pocket of what we're talking about just as actors. But to me, it kind of takes away from like the personal aspect. Just I think one thing we have to keep in mind is that it's acting. it's pretending, at the end of the day. And I mean, it has well, this is more like because a lot of us aren't famous, and we're not doing like we're. I think if you're a genuine artist, you know that the chances of making a lot of money, of being famous, getting famous from anything like this, are slim to none. Um, and you do it for the love of the art, right? So when you're doing this, like in, especially in sorry, it's kind of hard to find my place here because it's like it's something when I think about it, even though I have no personal connection with the people, it just makes me angry because I've got my sister, right, and my family, and our personal lives always always take priority.
Right. It sounds like the most important thing is thinking about, is it worth it, and kind of taking into account all that you have to risk when you go that far.
Full circle, right?
This is such a perennial question with professions in the arts, because your professional life is your personal life, and your personal life is your professional life in some ways.
Yeah,
and then
I mean,
how do you navigate that? Because it's not black and white. It's forever a gray area, and that's always going to come with many obstacles that are generally uncharted emotional territory, for sure. I hear you on that.
Well, that's, I think, part of acting, too, that, like I said, makes it exhilarating and also makes it a challenge, is that you are discovering through the art, you are discovering so many places you might not have gone emotionally. To try, because you are trying to go into a character, and sometimes you haven't experienced it, and you've got to bring that character to life, and so you have to do what you need to do to make it authentic, and sometimes you delve into thoughts and processes to try to get there emotionally. That's going to affect, it can leave an emotional, drain on you at least sometimes. And it's all, like you say, it's all an individual thing anyway. A lot of these things about why people do what they do I could see. It's funny how you brought that up, Joel, because I thought the same. I was thinking the same. I was thinking of Heath Ledger and the Joker when we were talking about the going places and where you're going and where he ended up shortly after that performance, and it is easy for all of us to tie in that performance and that authenticity that he had to go to some demonic man led him to this. That's an easy conclusion to make. But again, we don't know. We don't know, and we don't know with Robin Williams. What his emotion. Same with all of us. So that's the challenge of being an actor anyway. We're having to bring ourselves into this, and we are all both strong and weak in many ways, and we all have our issues. And so, regardless of if I was a fireman or what I do for a living, we all bring ourselves into what we do. And so some of us can, handle it, and sometimes it takes a little bit more of a challenge. So.
Yes, Chris, real quick. We can't really see your face. I mean, I'm kind of just seeing like from your mouth up. Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, there we go. And
right,
I'm
good.
sorry. I mean, I know. I kind of got off topic there. It's just like, I think, especially as us, from our side of the fence, it's important that we don't get caught up in the urban legends of, just what the media puts out there, because it's an interesting story, right? Heath Ledger got so deep into character that he OD'd and so, right? And that Robin Williams, it's good that you brought up Robin Williams, right? Because after that happened, one of the big talking points was his career. And the Pagliacci what is that we call it, Pagliacci? That it's a kind of joke from this Pagliacci clown
Oh,
parallel. I noticed that people were sharing that a lot. That it was like this person went to the doctor and said that he was super depressed, and the doctor's um, like his what the doctor recommended was that he go see the great clown Pagliacci, to cheer him up. And but the guy starts crying and saying, "But doctor, like I am Pagliacci. Like who makes the clown laugh? You know?" And
Yeah,
it's
that's an
important to
interesting
yeah,
example.
huh?
That's an interesting example.
Yeah, and it's important to keep in mind that as if when we want to be actors, what we really want to be is we want to entertain, and to entertain, we want to make it fun for everyone. Um, that's one of the main things. And I guess in this particular subject, like whether or not it's worth it, um, as long as we entertain, right? I mean, as long as we're telling this story that we're setting out to tell. And I guess
Absolutely.
because I'm coming into this from the perspective of a writer, from a filmmaking standpoint, um, yeah, I mean, we just want to make sure everyone has fun.
Absolutely. So I want to tie in another thing from the chat room. Acting school says that I don't think it's too far if you need that one extra step to really bring life to your character. It's just taking that one extra step to making the character more believable. And Jeff Cole adds, our character is just one part of the whole acting process. What are we trying to get and give to those who are on the runaway train with? Sometimes this becomes too self-focused and not allowing things external to our character prep to affect and change us. We don't
So,
always cry when we're sad or hurt. We don't always laugh when we're happy. I think that's a really good point.
yes, very good.
Yeah, so we're kind of getting into our final minutes here. That hour absolutely flew by. But I want to give you guys a chance to kind of just like make a final note, or if you have one final thing, comment that you wanted to say, feel free. And if you don't,
well,
that's okay too.
I just want to say, first off, I am really glad as far as the masterclass program goes. Like I said, it is very cool to be able to see these guys and spend some time with some of these people that are really the tops of their profession. And I'm so glad that they took the time to do this. Of course, we know they're making money doing it, but besides that,
Yeah,
it is you get a window into where they're coming from, and it really does help us all as artists to understand how somebody else paints, and like Dustin is one of the greats, as far as what he's done out there to contribute to beautiful movie making. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, cool. Rob or Noe, do you guys have any last comment?
I think. Go ahead, Noe. Sorry.
no,
Go ahead.
no, it's fine. Go for it.
Okay, I just something that comes up for me every time with going through these masterclass classes, witnessing someone who is at the top of their field and someone who is truly a master at their field. Hearing, even if I'm not necessarily a novelist, but for example, hearing James Patterson talk about how he approaches writing. Just the same, Dustin Hoffman say, if you're not an actor, there's something so worthwhile to be able to hear someone at the top of their field talk about their approach and why they are passionate about it, and it's applicable in a greater life sense, and that's what I keep coming back to. And how amazing is it that we can all be spread across the country and take an hour of our day to discuss this now? Like, that's amazing. This is crazy to me,
Awesome.
but I love it. Yeah.
And on that same note, one of the first things that I noticed, like I did. I made friends with a couple of people when I first took the Dustin Hoffman Masterclass about a year ago. Um,
Hmm.
One of the things that I noticed when I talked to people, other people who were also just getting either barely getting into it or getting back into it after not taking it as seriously before, how we all sort of hit the same notes. Like we started with this Dustin Hoffman Masterclass, and then we're talking to each other about Stanislavski and stuff like that, and just um, it really serves to bring a lot of us together because we know that we're all on the same track. We're all we're reaching towards the same goal. And real quick, um, there's a documentary that I want to recommend to everyone watching. Anyone who might watch this later, anyone watching this right now. It's I Knew It Was You, rediscovering John Cazale. You want to save that for later? Because I know we talked about that earlier when we were discussing when I mentioned how Dustin Hoffman might have chosen Meryl Streep because she had just lost her boyfriend, John Cazale. It's a really good documentary about John Cazale. Played I think his most famous role was playing Fredo in The Godfather 1 and 2.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I mean, if you guys want to check that out, it's a really good documentary about this one actor, John Cazale.
Awesome. Will you write that in the student group so everyone has it?
Sure, yeah. I've posted it before, but I know we've gotten tons more students since. But yeah, I'll go ahead and post that.
Wonderful.
And, yeah, and
Awesome.
it's yeah, we just I don't know. I think everyone who's taking this course will eventually reach the same, like they'll hit the same points in their learning. And it's really important that we all share what we're learning, and anything that's not in the class, in the videos or anything like that. I think it's important that we share everything we come across, like on that page, anything that we think is worthwhile.
Absolutely. Love that. Well, awesome. We're out of time, but thank you guys so much for hosting this discussion. I certainly learned a lot, and I hope the viewers learned a lot too. So thank you guys so much, and we will see you around the class. Thanks.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.